Hello, and welcome back to PTE Tutorials. We're glad to have you with us. In today's video, we're going to go over punctuation so that you can better write your essay. So, let's get started. First, we should go over capital letters. Capital letters are the big letters. This is a capital letter, and this is a lowercase letter. You use these to begin a new sentence that is right after a period, an exclamation mark, or a question mark. You also use these for proper nouns, which are names of people, places, books, and film titles. Next, we'll go over periods. Periods, also known as full stops, are needed in order to divide up sentences so that we know where a thought ends. They are also used in abbreviations such as Mr., Dr., Senior, and so on. Next we go over hyphens. Hyphens are dashes that go in the center of the line. They're usually used to attach prefixes, such as self, ex, and pro. If it's used before a proper noun, it will be hyphenated. For example, we have pro-American or anti-Catholic. You can also use hyphens between spelled out numbers and as a placement for a range of dates or page numbers. An example of a number is here at 22. As you can see, there's a hyphen. 1992 to 1994, since this is a range of years, you can put a hyphen in between those. And then also for page numbers, such as between pages 199 and 207, right here. A colon is an interesting bit of punctuation. Essentially, a colon shows that the words that follow are an explanation or an example of what's written before it. Such as if I were to say, there are many different things that make a pizza. Cheese, batter, sauce. That would have a hyphen right before those ingredients. Another example using another food item is a hamburger. A hamburger is made up of 3 different layers. Here is your colon, because it now lists your items. So the bottom half of the bun, the burger, and the top half of the bun. In a sentence, you should only ever use one colon, and it should be used, and that should never be followed by either a hyphen or a dash, which are in fact different things despite looking very similar. Next is the semicolon. It's similar to a colon, but it functions in a different way. Rather than appending your sentence with ingredients or lists, instead it appends one sentence with another sentence. It basically can be used, as shown here, instead of and. An example would be, it was the best year, it was the worst year also. Essentially, a quick test to determine whether or not a semicolon can be used is whether or not you can use the conjunction and. So, rather than using the semicolon, if you were to use and, you would say comma, and. It was the best year, and it was the worst year too. Or you can say it was the best year, semicolon, it was the worst year too. Round brackets are also a very useful bit of information that you can have. Brackets allow you to add extra information into a sentence. It can be useful, but it is not necessary. Essentially, when you look at a rounded bracket, the only things you put in there are things that can be taken out without altering the overall sentence. For example, Charlie Johnson, aged 21 years, has, unfortunately, played for Charlton for 3 seasons. Now you can take out the things in the rounded brackets and it doesn't affect the sentence. Charlie Johnson has played for Charlton for 3 seasons. As you can see, the things within the brackets can be taken out. Another way of using the brackets is if you want to insert information, but you don't necessarily want to change the sentence structure. You can put them within brackets and then word them properly. The next item is a comma. Sometimes we want to add information to make our writing clearer without distracting the reader from the sentence. Generally, these can work the same way as brackets, but they also have a much wider variety of uses. You have to use them with certain conjunctions. An example would be John. John, who hated cola, bought a lemonade from the cafe. You can take out the part that's in between the commas and just have John bought a lemonade in the cafe. You also use these in positions where you're sort of inserting things. Here is an example. Here, pairs of commas add extra details to a sentence without ruining the flow. You can take out here, you can just say, pairs of commas add extra details to a sentence without ruining the flow. One way to use a comma is also the Oxford comma. It's an optional comma before the word "and" at the end of a list. We sell books, videos, and magazines. You use this comma only in order to add clarity to a sentence, because you can have other examples. One example would be here, where we say we sell books, videos, and magazines. You only use the Oxford comma in order to add clarity. Another example could be, we brought our friends, Jack and Jill. If we say we brought our friends, comma, Jack, comma, and Jill, that would imply that your friends do not necessarily include Jack and Jill. If you leave out the comma, you would have, we brought our friends, Jack and Jill. You would have, we brought our friends, comma, Jack, no comma, and Jill. That would imply that your friends are Jack and Jill. The whole point of adding commas is to add clarity. You shouldn't just throw them anywhere in order to make the sentence look good. Next is an apostrophe. Apostrophes are the most commonly misused punctuation mark. They have three main uses. They're used for contractions, to show possession, and unusual plurals within the English language. For contractions, we use them in order to illustrate that there's some letters missing. So, one example would be to say, "It's" is short for "it is." You could say that it has "it is" short for "it is." Another example is, "will" is short for "we will" or "we shall." You could change that to, "we will" is short for "we will" or "we shall." Unfortunately, in that context, with what we're trying to show, it may not make sense. But for what we're showing here, that this can be pulled apart, it does. In general, you should avoid contractions in formal writing, and try to avoid them during the test. The only time that they are acceptable within formal writing is when you're quoting something. In that case, you should use quotes as exactly as possible. For possession, we use them to show possession, which is basically who or what owns something. An example is, "This is Max's book. This book belongs to Max." Adding an apostrophe and an S after a person, place, or thing shows that he, she, and it are the owner of the other thing in the sentence. However, we don't use the extra S if it already has a plural because it already ends in S, because it would be too difficult for us to pronounce, or when a word already ends in S effectively. So one example would be, the toilet's hand dryers are broken. Toilets is already plural, but in order to show that it's a plural possessive, that these hand dryers belong to multiple toilets, we just add an apostrophe. Within spoken English, you just sort of understand that. From written English, this is how you describe it. You only have 2 weeks holiday. Those plants' leaves are brown. Multiple plants have multiple leaves. Multiple leaves belong to multiple plants. We do also have some unusual plurals, such as numbers, letters, symbols, which would be unreadable otherwise. There is 1 C and 2 S's in the word necessary. If you remove this S, it's just weird looking, and you really shouldn't do that. My postcard has 2 B's in it. If you were to write B, no apostrophe S, it kind of looks strange. We move on to dashes. Dashes allow writers to strongly interrupt the flow of a sentence to provide their readers with useful information. This contrasts with a bracket. You would read this sentence as, the Countess glared at the maid, who had stolen the heart of her husband, and threw a silver hairbrush at her. You can remove what's in between the dashes and still have a good sentence. The Countess glared at the maid and threw a silver hairbrush at her. However, those dashes imply vital information for the sentence. The focus of a dash is to add extra details, and that would cause a major distraction that is necessary for the comprehension of your paragraph. Speech marks. These report speech in written English. They generally look like 2 or 1. The difference is really if you were to have a quote within a quote. So you would either have 2, and then you would have 1, and then close it off with 1, and then sometime later close it off with a second one. Or you can do the reverse. It's more of a style choice. An example here is given. John turned to Jane and said, "You love me." You'll notice how this works. When you have a narration where 2 people or 1 person is speaking and then followed by said, you must introduce that comma. Then you have your punctuation mark for speech, and then within your punctuation marks, you also throw in your period. You would never have a period after that. If the direct speech forms a complete sentence, it must start with a capital letter and finish with a full stop or period, as I showed before. However, if the speech is only part of a sentence, it must start with a lowercase. Now, some common punctuation mistakes include unnecessary question marks, too many commas or too few commas, excess exclamation or periods, and the use of SMS or, in the United States, texting language. Avoid these errors and try to remember all the different kinds of punctuation. There's many different kinds, however, with more reading and more writing, you become more and more comfortable and it becomes second nature. So don't give up. You can do it. Thank you again for watching. I hope you come back and watch further videos. And from all of us at PTE Tutorials, we hope you have a good rest of your day.